Alright, so I have my webcam here so I can show you guys the deck list and talk about the cards on an individual level. I apologize the quality is not that good, but let's go ahead and get into it. Kinemon, why are we playing him? Well, he's a faster leader than Kid. Kid is an extremely good leader, he is more valuable in the late game, but Kinemon lets you cheat out cards like Okiku and Yamato and Odin for one less Don, which does end up mattering quite a bit, especially if you're playing against Red. This deck is basically the anti-red deck. Not so much Whitebeard. Whitebeard is a different monster altogether. I would actually say he's one of the tougher matchups. But Kinemon is especially good against Luffy and Zoro, and that is the reason why you would want to play this leader. If you know a lot of people at locals are playing those decks, then this is the deck for you. So yeah, what you're looking to do is you're basically looking to cheat out Okiku, and that's what you're looking for in your mulligan, right? So that's kind of all there is to say about that. If you get an Odin out for 7 Don, that's also really good. Of course, the standard Momo 4, this is your searcher. You're going to get him in your starting hand. That's also really good. You can use him to search for Kikus and Yamatos or Odins. Whatever you can grab, it's going to be good. This is a card, well, let's just say this is the dream card. If you get a Momo and an Okiku in your starting hand, it's so devastating. It's basically what you're looking for every turn, right? You go first, which is also the dream. You always want to go first as Kinemon because you're cheating out cards for cheaper Dawn. So going first is going to make that even more deadly. You play a Momo on turn 1 for 1 Dawn. Next turn, you're at 3 Dawn. Well, guess what? You can use the effect, search, and then with your other 2 Dawn, you can cheat out a 3. It could be a Raizo, an Okiku, whatever. If you get an Okiku Momo, that's just an insane lead that it's so difficult for the opponent to kind of deal with. The tempo and speed of that is insane, and you can just control the game from there. So yeah, you're always going to have 4 Momo. Next up, I play 2 Cat Viper. This card is not as amazing as it used to be, and the only reason that I'm running it is because it is simply an Anti-Zoro card. It doesn't have a whole lot of hits against other decks, but it has every single hit against Zoro, right? You're going to be able to hit any of their 1-drops, the Sunny-kun, Curly Dodon, Nami, whatever. You want to try to aggressively clear their board with Cat Viper, and that's what you're looking to do with this card. It doesn't hit 4-drops, so that's kind of the problem. Other decks are going to have a lot of 4s, and Cat Viper can just be used as a 1k counter, probably in that scenario. Otherwise, yeah, it's basically an anti-Zoro card. You can bounce it and use it again with a Law, and that's pretty much the only time you're going to use Cat Viper. It's extremely good and helps you even more in the red matchup, but other than that, it kind of is lacking in power. But the 1k counter is what you're going to use it for most likely in any other matchup. So you're going to run 2 of those, and then of course the staple, the best in slot, Okiku. She is the best card in the deck. If you can get Okiku turn 1, not necessarily turn 1, but you can play her for 2 Dawn on your first time that you can play her, you play her. It's going to give you insane value. This is the card that can just win you the game against most decks, so you always want to try to mulligan for her. If you have the ability to choose Momo versus Okiku, you always want to grab the Okiku hand over a Momo hand. Even if you start with Momo, you could try to search for it. It could be okay, but I think it might be worth mulliganing just to try to get the Okiku instead. Next card. Raizo is an insanely good card, but I don't think he's good enough to have 4 of. This is a card that gives you card draw, and you can cheat it out with not just your leader effect, but also Odin if you really wanted to. But it also is not that high of attack, so it doesn't really help you win the game all that often. It's really good if you can get the draw effects off, but the 4k attack is actually not bad against Zoro, because most of their cards require the 1k buff from the Zoro effect or the Makino in order to really have that value. And so once they're done, if you're able to get a 4k swing on them, it's pretty valuable. And another thing that's kind of nice about the 4K is it dodges Vista, which is something that you're going to get hit a lot of with Cat Viper, which is another reason why Cat Viper isn't that great. Most of the 3K or less cards are just going to be targets for Vista to kill. So Raizo kind of dodges that, so it makes it a little bit better, and the draw card effect is amazing, but I don't want to say get greedy with it. There are plenty of times where I'm just happy to discard him for the counter in order to save myself from taking a life, because that is more important. That is the bigger picture. Extra cards are always pretty good, but sometimes it's not really what you always need to do. Sometimes you just need to try to protect your life. It is more important, especially against the Zoro matchup. If you're trying to play against other decks, other greens, maybe even Navy, then this card you always want to try to do the draw effect with, though. But yeah, I just run 3 of that. I don't think 4 is necessary because you already have 2 searchers in the deck. Next up, we have Shachi. In other words, the 3k blocker that you can cheat out for 2. And just like the Raizo, it has 4k attack, which allows you to dodge Vista, which is very important, which is why I like this card. You can also grab him with a Odin if Odin dies, but cheating out a blocker for 2 is really good. It's not what you always want to do, but it's pretty valuable. You can go ahead and get a little bit of value from it. It's much better than the other card, Shachi, because this is a Wano card, which means you can search it with Momo, which is something you can't do with Shachi. So that's why I really like that card. I only do 3 of it because I think having 4 is just a little too defensive, because we are trying to play the deck aggressively and control, so we don't want to have too many blockers. So of course we have 4 of Izo. Izo or Izo is rest a card. It's pretty effective against Zoro. If you have any 1-costers, just go ahead and play it, rest whatever they have, and then just kill it. And the 3k attack doesn't kill too many things, but against Zoro it's quite good. The 2k counter, of course, is always what it's pretty good for, but ideally you can use the effect still and get some value out of it if you don't have Yamato, who's probably the best card in the deck. This card is insane. You play it for 3 and you can rest a 6. So the reason why this is really good is because there are so many control decks. I mean, you can go for a lower target, that's fine. If something is on the board and it's going to be annoying and you have to get rid of it, get rid of it. Especially against red, don't try to hold on to it for something big because it just won't happen. But if you're playing against, for example, like I played against Z in the finals, they played a queen, and you're able to just rest queen, a 5-cost blocker, and kill it immediately, and then you just have a 6k on board. That's insane value. The only downside to this card is it doesn't have a counter, but honestly, I don't see a world where you would do that. You always just get so much value when you play this card. It's so good in the control match. If you want to get this in your hand and keep it against a more control-y deck over Okiku, I think this is reasonable. Resting blockers is what she's amazing at, but hey, you know, you can maybe get something even more valuable with that. So yeah, 4 is a must in a Kinemon deck. And then we have our big boy, our boss, the 4 of, the Odin. It would not be boiled. So yeah, you need 4 of these. You can play this card for 7. That's kind of what you're looking to do. If it dies, that's completely fine. And sometimes I don't even use the double attack effect, because I kind of even want to bait them to attack it, because it does make them use more resources. And even if he dies, getting something on board is pretty solid, because you can bring out, like, Izo and, like, rest something, or a blocker, or Raizo. Like, there are so many different ways to have this death effect work in your favor. You don't feel forced to use the effect to use 3 Dawn to attack twice. You don't have to. You can simply just attack once with an 8k on board and kind of treat it like a Magellan, where like, oh, you don't want to kill this. If you kill this, you got another problem, right? And that's kind of what Odin is. The double attack is just icing on there, but you don't really have to do it because sometimes you just want to use that Dawn for something else. So yeah, it's really good for getting over things. I would say this card is super important if you know that you're going to be playing against like Kid, because this is the 8-cost Kid killer right here. Being able to swing twice here with like 10k or something generally will get the job done. So yeah, I run 4 of that. It sucks if you get a lot of them in your hand, but generally this deck has a lot of ways to keep drawing cards. And speaking of drawing cards, we have that girl Bonnie, 4 of. Pretty simple. That was all the Wano cards, by the way. These are all going to be the Supernova cards. Bonnie is a great searcher. Just search those Supernovas, get more blockers, or 2k Apus. That's all you're trying to do. Not anything too crazy there. And here we have only 3 Capones. I like Capone. He's great. I save him in my hand. There is no reason for you to play Capone in the early game, because you need your leader effect in the early game as much as possible. So if you're just going to put a bunch of like 1-cost cards on the board, you're not ever going to be able to use the Kinemon Leader effect. And because you're at 5 life, there's really no reason for you to play this card. If you want to play 1, if that's your only play, I get it. But you might want to consider to just kind of throw away the block and not hold on to it, because you're not really going to get the Kinemon effect value if you do that. So the whole point of this is for the late game. For example, I played against Zoro in a semi-final, and I had 2 Capones in my hand for a pretty long time, and I knew that I had to get another one, so I made sure to search with my Bonnie and grab a third. And instead of going for game with Odin, it was a risky play. I could have tried to do a double attack with Odin for game. The reason why I didn't is because the Zoro player dropped a Whitebeard, and because of that, he probably could have countered his way out of the attack, so I didn't really want to risk it. So I knew that because the Whitebeard was going to attack next turn, most likely he was going to kill one of the Capones with like Vista, and then he would be able to use the Whitebeard effect to pop the second one, and so I wouldn't have any defenses. So I made sure to hold on the Capones for the very late game and not use them until I really needed them, and I just went Capone, Capone, Capone instead of for double attack, right? Saving this card for late game when the Kinemon effect doesn't really matter anymore is exactly what you want to do. This is just to save your life and put up a wall. And I was like, okay, sure, you pop a Capone with Vista, you pop one with Whitebeard, I can still block the Whitebeard attack. And then I was able to live for one more turn and then do the double attack when the leader was back at 5k instead of 7, and that was basically securing the game. So yeah, this card's great. You don't want to play it early. You don't really want to have this blocker over the others. It's just a really cheap, efficient card that you want to keep in your hand and save it for late game. You don't want to put this out there aggressively early. It's just going to get killed. It's really bad if you do that. Next up, 3 Killers. This is a card I love. You can search it. You can use it as a counter. You can potentially draw a card. But let's be honest, it almost never happens. It's another target of Vista. It'll die pretty easily, and you're most likely not going to draw a card with it. I've used them as counters a lot. I've put them down, but I usually don't even put the Dawn on there anymore because I just know it's not going to go through. If it does, it's only because they've already popped other things with Vista. If I see 2 Vistas played already, then I can use the Dawn effect on Killer. But if you see them use one, like if they used 1 Vista, I guarantee you they most likely have another one in their hand already. They just always have 2. It's the third one when the Killer effect can actually work. So yeah, it's a good card. It's a great card, but it's not good enough to have 4 of. Basically what I did is I kind of made room. I got rid of 1 Killer and I got rid of 1 Capone in order to add more of the Cat Viper blocker, who I think is way better because he actually avoids Vista. So I was just trying to make room for it. I believe I dropped 1 Raizo and went down to 3 in order to do that as well, because 3 of these cards, 3 Cat Viper is just so good. So next up we have the standard 4 Apus. Check it out. We have 4 of them. Pretty simple, 2k counter, extremely valuable. Don't be afraid to search for it. And then we have the Spice, 2 Killers. This is the Anti-Zoro card. We don't want to have too many. This used to be 2 X-Drakes, but I like this way more. The trigger happens and it saves you. It really does save you. And X-Drake is too slow. That's the thing. X-Drake is like 5 Dawn, and maybe you hit something, and then maybe you have a 6k on board. But honestly, I find myself doing this combo way too often. I end up having the Kinemon Leader effect to play for 3, and then a Killer for 3. So for 6 Dawn, you can get a rest and a pop on something, and then establish a board that does really well against Zoro, and then you can bait out a Vista. There's just so much good stuff that you can do with Killer. You can also maybe get another use out of him, of course, with the Law, but I really like this card more than X-Drake. I think X-Drake is a little too greedy, and you're not going to get it on the board, and you're also using too much Dawn to do so. So I like to have the Yamato Killer combo. I think it's really good. Also with Cat Viper, I have 2 Cat Vipers, so you could potentially get that combo off with it as well, which is also even cheaper. So if you can Cat Viper Killer, it's going to be even better. But sometimes just having the 6k on board is kind of nice. But this is great. That's great Vista bait, basically. So now we have the big boys. The Laws are really solid blockers. It sucks when they get jet pistoled. but it happens. You're basically just trying to get your Ezo back. So the whole reason, I mean, the best value you can get out of them is basically use the rest effect from Ezo if you have one. If you're able to play an Ezo a turn before, and then basically the next turn you attack maybe a low cost card, and then you're able to bounce and play like something actual, like a killer or whatever, like something that has better value, and then you can basically get the rest effect from him and the 2k counter effect, being able to bounce him back to hand. And that's really what you're looking to do. And honestly, I almost never block with him. I pretty much attack with him. He's just a 6k attacker because there's so much resting and control in this deck that as long as you have 3 life, do not use him as a blocker. Use him as an attacker. This is an attacker, all right? Attack with him. You're not going to use him to block unless you're at 2 or less life. Then it kind of becomes a problem. Then you kind of need to do that. But other than that, he's an attacker. Next up, we have 2 7-cost kids. This card is here purely because he is the GOAT in the mirror match. If you're playing against any other green deck, this card is what you're looking for, even better than Odin, in my opinion. He is so good, and there is nothing green can do about him. This card is useless if you're playing against somebody that probably has a 9-cost Mihawk. So yeah, if you're playing against blue, never go for this card. Never try to play it. Just keep it in your hand. Maybe if you see them drop a Mihawk, you can go for it. But if they have another one, you're just so screwed on tempo. It's not worth it. But this card is your control deck GOAT. Even better than Odin, in my opinion. You want to use this guy. So yeah, make sure he doesn't die and just keep swinging from him. And then just block whatever their last attack is. And then the last thing are the events. I used to have 2. Now I only have 1 of each. Simple reason, this card, both of these cards are quite good, but in this stage of the meta, every player knows what they do. So very rarely will I ever actually get value out of Punk Gibson resting something. Everybody's gonna just, attack first, so nothing gets rested, right? Like if they only have this on board, they're just gonna attack with this. And so if I Punk Gibson, I have no targets to rest. Like, people know how to play around Punk Gibson. It's not that good. It's still good, but it's not that good. It's not enough both cards really, they don't help you make the board state improve. They only are defensive ways for you to help catch up. So these are cards that are good when you're behind, but they're not so good when you're ahead. They don't help you win more. They don't really even help you win because you can't even really use them if the game state is kind of neutral. These cards are only good when you are behind, and that's it. So yeah, I only run 1 of those. I used to do 2 of each, but yeah, I think that is fine. I prefer having other options such as 2 killers and 2 cat vipers. And yeah, that's basically it for the deck profile. So yeah, guys, that is it for this video. If you guys like this style more, where I'm actually, showing off the real cards with a camera, please let me know, and maybe I can get a better camera because I know this one is a really cheap webcam. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and please let me know in the comments what you guys think, and if I should do any other decks next that you are interested in, or maybe some of the future sets or something like that. But anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Peace.